in full view of everyone. My half-sister and my fiancé were caught together. She looked at me tearfully, expecting me to step aside for the marriage as I had in my past life. But she didn't know I had been reborn. This time, she could only be a concubine. At the spring banquet, when Xian sighed, Tally knocked over a wine cup and left the table to change her clothes. Half an hour later, a shriek pierced the air from the side chambers when I arrived with the ladies of the banquet. When Xian and the crown prince had already been discovered tangled together. Their clothes askew, every paw. Of eyes turned to me. For these two, one my half-sister, the other my betrothed since childhood, were the ones involved. Father sat in the main hall, his face ashen, when Xian knelt on the ground, sobbing in gasps. By the time my stepmother arrived, Father had already taken up the family discipline rod. Seeing her approach, Father raised the rod high and brought it down, just like in my past life. The stepmother stepped forward and lashed out, slapping Wen Xian hard across the face several times. "I'll beat you to death, you shameless creature." Wen Xian's cheeks instantly swelled high. Her father, unable to bear it, intervened to stop the stepmother. Only then did the stepmother collapse, as if deflated, kneeling beside Wen Xian and weeping together with her. I watched the scene coldly. Sure enough, just like in my previous life, my father sighed heavily and tossed the stick aside. In my previous life, I treated them as family until my dying breath. Yet after my death, they trampled my bones, squandered my wealth, and meticulously crafted Wen Xian into the virtuous and gracious marquise's wife, all to harvest praise. As for me, the former legitimate daughter of the Wen household and betrothed to the marquis' heir, I became nothing more than a subject of scorn in people's idle chatter. "Oh, you mean that unfaithful slut?" My palms stung fiercely from my nails digging in. This lifetime, I would never let myself die in vain as I had before. Young Miss Xian must have fallen victim to someone's schemes. Please do not hold it against her. My stepmother wiped her tears, rose, and took my hand. Rest assured, I shall send her to the family temple tomorrow. Her eyes brimmed with hope as she looked at me. In my past life, unable to bear seeing her and father grieving, I had proposed breaking off the engagement. After all, I never cared for the marquis' heir my maternal grandmother had chosen for me. Yet, through her silver tongue, she convinced father to agree to my marriage to her maternal nephew. But this time, I won't. I exhaled deeply, relieved, then lifted my head. Eyes reddened. "Auntie, are you truly willing?" I had feared you might refuse. But after all, Xianer was exposed before everyone. Rumors spread like wildfire. For Yenner alone, it wouldn't matter. She could stay home to serve father. Yet the other sisters would inevitably gossip. Her eyes narrowed sharply, clearly taken aback by my words. Father values the family's interests above all else. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, father behind her swung the stick in his hand. Strike in. Ji Wen Xian with brutal force, unable to dodge in time. Wen Xian let out a shrill cry. With a sharp ouch, she collapsed to the ground, blood pooling beneath her. A smirk touched my lips. This was exactly what I'd been waiting for. Wen Xian and my betrothed, the young master, had long been involved. This spring banquet was nothing but a scheme they'd orchestrated to force me into voluntarily breaking off the engagement. In my past life, I'd foolishly fallen for their trap. I'd stumbled upon their affair alone. And later, to protect the reputation of my sisters and family, I'd willingly renounced the marriage, becoming their stepping stone. It wasn't until when Xian later gave birth, prematurely, and I visited her at the Marquis's residence, overhearing the servants' gossip, that I finally understood. But by then, I was already about to marry her maternal cousin. She was the mother of the Marquis's heir, while I was merely the fiancé of a poor scholar. Needless to say, my father wouldn't stand up for me. The sound of my father's stick hitting the ground snapped me back to reality. My stepmother, her face ashen, ordered the maidservant to escort Wen Xian back to her room, while father bellowed for someone to fetch a physician. Chaos erupted in the hall. Just tea. Hen. The servant dispatched by father returned, leading a gray-haired elder with a delighted expression. Master, Physician Huang has just arrived to examine the eldest miss. I watched with satisfaction as Wen Xian's complexion instantly drained. My father was a third-place scholar chosen by my maternal grandfather during his lifetime, while my mother was a princess. Mother had initially refused the match, but father's dashing appearance and charismatic demeanor won her heart during the wedding procession. Little did she know father had a gentle and lovely cousin waiting at home. She happily married him, and after my maternal grandfather passed, father's career stabilized. He then took it upon himself to elevate his cousin to concubine status and bring her into the household. This concubine brought with her Wen Xian, who was about my age. It turned out that throughout the years of father and mother's tender affection, he had been keeping her and her mother hidden away. My mother, already weakened by childbirth, was so enraged she coughed up blood on the spot. She grew despondent and passed away within a few years. Before her death, she arranged my marriage to the Marquis's household through my maternal grandmother. After my mother's death, my father, now firmly established, gradually severed ties with my maternal family. Only my maternal grandmother remained concerned for me. She invited imperial physicians monthly to examine me, allowing her to keep tabs on my well-being. Today, of course, was all part of my plan. Early this morning, I asked my maternal grandmother to have imperial physician Huang wait at the gate, instructing him to enter if anyone from the mansion came to summon a doctor. Wen Xian strongly resisted letting imperial physician Huang take her pulse, clearly aware of her pregnancy. But that was precisely my goal, to make a scene, one that would be impossible to contain. Xianer, you're bleeding. Hurry and let physician Huang examine you. What if this leaves lasting damage to your health? I frowned disapprovingly at Wen Xian. Father also shot her a cold glance, then abruptly pushed away the concubine who'd been tugging at his sleeve. Upon hearing about the bleeding, Dr. Huang swiftly stepped forward to take Wen Xian's pulse, then immediately administered acupuncture. Aft, a flurry of activity. He wiped his brow. Fortunately, I was present. Otherwise, not only would the fetus be lost, but it would also deplete her vitality, potentially leaving lasting damage. Father understood the implication instantly. He lunged forward again, only to be held back by the concubine. Wen Xian had first been caught in an illicit affair, and now she was secretly pregnant. Her stepmother knelt before father, pleading desperately. I knew it was my turn to step in. Sighing, I approached. Father, there is a solution. A formal marriage with a grand palanquin procession might be too late for Xian's pregnancy, but she could become a concubine. Father slammed his fist into the wall. Auntie looked up at me in disbelief, while Wen Xian shrieked beside her. No, I won't be a concubine. How could I ever be a concubine? I wore a sorrowful expression, though inside I was overjoyed. If she refuses to be a concubine, does my sister intend to shave her head and become a nun? Between becoming a concubine and a nun, Wen Xian reluctantly chose the former. After all, the pregnancy couldn't wait. The Marquis' household was naturally overjoyed upon hearing the news. Their initial willingness to arrange the marriage with me had been solely out of respect for my maternal grandmother. Wen Xian, however, was merely a secondary daughter. To marry a concubine's daughter over the legitimate heiress, no matter how deeply the heir was proclaimed to love her, would invite gossip, especially after Wen Xian and the heir caused such a scandal, utterly disgracing the Marquis' household. After both sides reached an agreement, Wen Xian, her heart heavy, carried a single box of trousseau as a small sedan chair carried her into the Marquis' residence. Before her departure, I went to add to Wen Xian's trousseau. Though you are to be a concubine, you carry the heir of the young master. With his child, you will surely rise in status. Wen Xian flared up at these words. Wen Yan, don't gloat. Had you not meddled, the young master would have promised me the position of principal wife. I couldn't help but clap my hands in laughter. So what? Remember this, sister. Without my consent, all your scheming amounts to nothing more than securing a lowly concubine status. Wrath consumed Wen Xian as she pulled out the jewels I'd gifted her, poised to smash them on the floor. Yet hesitation gripped her at the thought of their immense value. I turned away with a cold sneer. In my past life, I cherished our sisterly bond and never guarded against Heronly to invite a wolf into my home and meet a tragic end. Now she's merely a concubine. How could that possibly ease the hatred in my heart? Not long after Wen Xian entered the Marquis' estate, the Marquis' wife showed up with her face brazenly exposed. Initially, I paid her no mind, but when I learned they were discussing my marriage, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. They could scheme against anyone, but with me, never. After mother passed, father did consider remarrying and even had a suitable candidate in mind. Yet the concubine was quite cunning, leading father to mistakenly believe the woman couldn't tolerate me alongside her and her daughter. That was enough to dissuade him. For father, this new wife wasn't essential, especially since he still needed my grandfather's support. Thus over the years, the household duties fell to the concubine. After managing the household for so long, the concubine unexpectedly began to see herself as the mistress of the Wen household. When I entered the flower hall, Lady Ho and the concubine were deep in conversation. Spotting me, the concubine froze. Yenner, what brings you here? By protocol, she ought to have addressed me as eldest daughter. I cast her a cool glance. Her face paled. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to embarrass her so openly before Lady Ho. Then I turned to Lady Ho. Yenner greets Lady Ho. The smile on Lady Ho's face instantly stiffened. The bracelet she just slipped off her wrist to offer me was abruptly pulled back onto her own. As a young lady confined to the inner quarters, I should not be receiving guests. Yet with no mistress of the house present, my concubine dared to entertain visitors. I fear I have caused Lady Ho much embarrassment. I pretended not to notice. What brings you here today? Lady Ho. Madame Ho's face flushed alternately pale and crimson. After exchanging polite pleasantries, she rose to take her leave. The concubine attempted to detain her, but I stepped before her. My cold gaze swept over the concubine's face. A mere concubine dares meddle in the marriage of the legitimate daughter. Does the concubine presume that managing the household chores makes her the mistress of this estate? You, worthy. With a thud, she knelt. This concubine has overstepped. Please forgive me, eldest daughter. Yet reprimanding her concubine was no long-term solution. Though I could suppress her with propriety and status, she remained father's bedmate. Once or twice, father might overlook it. But if it happened too often, after I was merely a daughter. Thus, I recalled the woman father had originally favored Jiang Ruo. Jiang Ruo was the daughter of a military officer, with men in her family wielding swords and spears. She held a particular fondness for scholars. Unfortunately, she had long accompanied her elder brother on frontier campaigns. By the time she returned to the capital, she was past marriageable age, neither high nor low in status. She remained unmarried. Later, when father sought a new wife, someone suggested Jiang Ruo, and he came to see her, and at first glance, she was taken with There's appearance, but Jiang Ruo was too straightforward, unfamiliar with the intricate ways of the inner quarters. That's how she fell into the concubine's trap, leading father to mistakenly believe she couldn't tolerate me or her mother and daughter in my previous life. Until my death. She remained unmarried. On the day Jiang Ruo and I met, she rode in on horseback, clad in a red riding outfit. Upon entering, she scrutinized me from head to toe, her face filled with confusion. You wanted to see me. I bowed respectfully. Had your marriage to father been consummated that year, today I would have had to call you mother. Jiang Ruo paused at my words. I didn't expect you to remember me. Yenner has come today to ask Miss Jiang one question. Do you still hold affection for my unworthy father? Are you willing to enter the Wen household as its mistress? I bowed low before her. Jiang Ruo remained silent, her gaze fixed on me. I couldn't help but sigh. I know the harm my stepmother caused back then. You were disgraced in the capital. I only regret that I was too young to tell right from wrong, mistaking a good person for a villain. Our resentment toward me is understandable. Jiang Ruo suddenly chuckled softly. I never cared much for your stepmother's opinions, but you are the legitimate daughter. I assumed you too would oppose my joining the Wen family. Since you did, I wouldn't force it. Yet now, Wen Yan, what exactly are you after? I looked up at Jiang Ruo. Her phoenix eyes were slightly raised, a faint smile playing at the corners of her mouth. In that instant, I understood. If I wanted her help, I had to lay my heart bare. Father is easily swayed, and the concubines in the mansion are cunning. As a junior, it's not my place to meddle in the affairs of elders. I know Miss Jiang holds some affection for my father. That's why I came here today, unannounced. Please, Miss Jiang, give me a chance and give yourself one too. Coming here today was a gamble. Though my mother is gone, the living must carry on. Alone in the Wen household, I'm a lone tree unable to support itself. My maternal grandmother is too far removed to help. Jiang Ruo has a fiery temperament, and her family background is suitable. Yet after no reply for so long, just as my heart was pounding with anxiety, I heard Jiang Ruo's snort with derision. I've heard tales of your household affairs. When I saw you as a child, you relied on your concubine for every decision. But these past years, your transformation has truly made me look at you with new eyes. I forced a bitter smile. Experience teaches wisdom. As a child, I couldn't discern deceit, but now I've tasted hardship and find every step difficult. Jiang Ruo burst into laughter upon hearing this. Very well. Since you're being so sincere and open with me, I'll spare you the pretense. Yes, all these years, I still haven't forgotten your father, that soft-haired fool. With that, she swung herself onto her horse, gritting her teeth as she added, Stay out of this marriage. As for Wen Kai, just wait. I'll make sure he's wiped out completely. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel aimed. Suddenly, I began to worry about my father's future. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a youth in brocade robes leaning against a nearby tree, watching me with keen interest. It was Pei Chuan, the man falsely accused of being my lover in my past life. Never did I expect to encounter him here in this lifetime. My expression hardened, and I swiftly departed. Jiang Rua kept his word, arriving at our residence the very next day to propose marriage. Father's face darkened at the news, ready to erupt only to find Jiang Rua clad in crimson armor, a spear pressed against his thr. Oat, Wen Qi. Dare you refuse? My father's formidable presence instantly dimmed. He could only seethe. Jiang Rua. I've never seen you so what? Shameless. Jiang Rua leaned closer to my father. You said the same thing to me 10 years ago, father. Now I'm here to ask whether you'll marry or not. What does that have to do with your so-called propriety and integrity? If we're truly discussing propriety, then that night in the cave, you shouldn't have touched me. Jiang Rua's words exploded like thunderclaps beside my ears. I lifted my head, staring at my father in disbelief. My father's aged face flushed crimson as he raised his sleeve to cover his face. Jiang Rua. You, what? Dare to do it but not own up. Jiang Rua sheathed his silver spear, his expression calm and composed, seemingly unaware of how shocking his words had been. Back then, I thought your inner courtyard was in turmoil and said you didn't need to take responsibility. But now, I've changed my mind, father. The concubine called softly to father from the side, but retreated dejectedly under Jiang Rua's piercing glare. As for me, the spectator enjoying the drama, I struggled to stifle my laughter. So, inviting Jiang Rua over, was that a case of hitting the nail on the head by accident? Opposites attract. Jiang Rua's wedding date was set swiftly. The dowry was already prepared, and since she'd been waiting at home for so long, the Jiang family even arranged a separate betrothal gift. Father couldn't bear the shame of refusing. Yet having the concubine arrange the betrothal gifts was equally unacceptable. Thus, the responsibility fell upon me. Days before the wedding, as Jiang Rua and I discussed the arrangements, when Xian returned to the estate, her prominent pregnancy belly visible, accompanied by the Crown Prince Wei Lin. When Xian, I never realized before how far your influence extends, even meddling in matters within father's chambers. When Xian avoided the Crown Prince and came to see me alone. Sister, choose your words carefully. Once Jiang Rua enters our household, she will be our mother. Besides, all in the capital know father originally favored her. Since they share mutual affection, we as children should bless fat. Hers choice. I glanced at her. When Xian fumed, my mother, she lives right here in this mansion. If not for your interference, father would have elevated her to official wife long ago. I shook my head at Wen Xian. Sister, surely you know that elevating a concubine to wife is a grave taboo. Only families of dubious reputation commit such folly. Father's career is flourishing now, why would he jeopardize his promising future? When Xian's face drained white, she pointed at me, stammering you for a long while before clutching her stomach and wailing in pain. The concubine arrived in a flash. So swiftly it felt as if she'd been waiting at the courtyard gate. She immediately directed the maids to lay Wen Xia on the bed, then send someone to fetch the doctor while sending word to father and Wei Lin in the front courtyard. I watched the mother and daughter put on their show before me in silence. Jiang Rua, standing nearby, was already showing signs of impatience. I tugged her hand, signaling her to stay calm. The physician arrived swiftly, declaring Wen Xian had experienced a miscarriage and must not be moved lightly. Upon hearing this, the stepmother immediately knelt on the ground, pleading with me to let Wen Xian rest in my room for the next few days. Considering our sisterhood, suddenly, Memories from my past life flooded back. My aunt had pleaded with me in exactly the same way, asking me to give up my marriage to Wen Xian. I couldn't help but sigh. Such a crude and obvious ploy, yet in my previous life I had been so blinded by pity for that feigned affection that I had been completely deceived. Seeing my silence, Wei Lin suddenly stepped forward to plead for Wen Xian. Yan I know Wen Xian and I have wronged you first. Now that Wen Xian is with child, we only hope you'll allow her to stay with you for a few days. Considering your sisterhood. Father tried to step forward too, but Jiang Ruo stopped him with a sharp glare. He silently turned his head away. Everyone except Jiang Ruo looked at me earnestly, expecting me to agree, but why should I? I curved my lips slightly. Your Highness overstates the case. Were Wen Yan still unmarried, I'd gladly give this room to you and my younger sister. Wen Xian urgently tugged at Wei Lin's sleeve, while her stepmother chimed in. Master. Eldest daughter. Xian'er's situation is unique now. Besides, we're all family here. I'll ensure not a word escapes. I paused, silently observing this staged performance. Wen Xian timed her soft, pleading voice perfectly. Your Highness. This is the eldest grandson of the Marquis's household. Everyone waited for my concession, but I merely stated calmly. After all, this physician was chosen at random. The accuracy of his diagnosis remains uncertain. I shall immediately send a note from my grandmother inviting Imperial Physician Huang to examine my sister. Only then would it be fitting for the eldest grandson of the Marquis's household within my sister's womb. Wen Xian was merely pretending all along, naturally not daring to have Imperial Physician Huang examine her personally. A look of shame and indignation flashed across her face. She forced herself to stand, letting the matron support her back to her original courtyard. Once she left, the concubine naturally followed. Jiang Ruo gave her father a cold snort. He too reluctantly trailed after her. When I turned back, only Wei Lin remained in the room. I looked up at him, and he was looking at me too. Seeing me turn, he smiled. Yan I took a few steps back. Why haven't you left yet? Your Highness. Wei Lin, however, looked at me and asked, Yan shouldn't we also set a date for our marriage? I never imagined such brazen audacity existed in this world. In my previous life, I had little interaction with Wei Lin, and my impression of him was limited to what others described as a gentleman of integrity. I frowned. I thought the crown prince would understand that since Xian'er has already married into the Marquis's household, our betrothal naturally becomes void. The will of our parents, the words of the matchmaker Xian'er's matter, I admit, was a moment of my own foolishness. Once you enter my household, I shall make it up to you. Wei Lin gazed at me with deep affection. Wei Lin was a charmer. Countless noble ladies in the capital sought his hand. Yet he had pledged himself to me long ago, when our betrothal was dissolved in my previous life and he married Wen Xian. Many came to mock me. That led me to self-destruction, making mistake after mistake. Your Highness jests, I replied. Since Xian'er has already married into the Wen household, it is utterly impossible for Wen Yan to wed you. I implore you to return the betrothal documents without delay. Dissolve this engagement, and allow us both to seek suitable partners. My words rang out with unwavering conviction, leaving him no room for reversal. In my past life, Wen Xian schemed against me precisely because she desired to marry him. This lifetime, I returned the favor by scheming against Wen Xian, sending her to the Marquis's estate as a concubine. This Prince Wei had nothing to do with me in my past life, and naturally, he remains irrelevant in this one. Wei Lin gave me a deep look. Yan I'll pretend I never heard today's words. Should you regret this, you may come find me anytime. Before I could refuse, Wei Lin turned and left. At my aunt's pleading, he permitted Wen Xian to temporarily reside at the Wen residence. Though he would visit her daily, Jiang Ruo scoffed. Upon hearing the news, typical of a concubine's daughter utterly lacking in tact, a concubine receiving her husband's favor to visit family is already a sign of his generosity. Yet now she dares to press her advantage. Staying overnight at the Wen residence, it only invites gossip. I shook my head. When had Wen Xian or her aunt ever truly understood their place? Soon, the day of father and Jiang Ruo's grand wedding arrived. With their lowly status, the aunt and Wen Xian could only retreat to the back courtyard, feeling wronged and humiliated, while I bustled about outside. I suddenly spotted Pei Chuan among the banquet guests and froze in surprise. In my past life, while offering incense at the temple, a band of mountain bandits suddenly emerged. They forcibly carried me up the mountain, intending to extort money from the Wen family, but along the way, lust took hold of them, and they tried to assault me, with no other choice. I retreat to the lakeside, resolving that if things went badly, I would throw myself into the lake. By chance, Pei Chuan passed by and rescued me. However, my injuries left me unable to travel, and by the time he brought me back, it was already the early hours of the next day. By then, my stepmother Wen Xian had already reported me missing to the authorities, spreading the news of my abduction by bandits throughout the entire circle of noble ladies in the capital. When Pei Chuan brought me back, both of us were disheveled and in a sorry state, with Wen Xian and my stepmother determined to make the scandal public, no matter how innocent the first truly was. My reputation was utterly ruined. My father, swayed by my aunt's persistent whispers, finally agreed to my earlier plea and hastily arranged my marriage to her maternal nephew. Before the wedding, Pei Chuan came to see me, saying he would take responsibility for me if I was willing, but I knew that if I married Pei Chuan, I would only burden another soul. The world's rules are harsh on women yet lenient toward men. As a military commander, he need only depart for a few years and win several battles. Even if our affair were ever mentioned later, it would merely earn him the reputation of a dashing general. The world is unjust. All blame ultimately falls upon me alone. So I refused Pei Chuan. He saved me out of kindness. How could I drag him into the water? The day Pei Chuan departed for the frontier coincided with the eve of my wedding. I chose a white silk sash to end my life in my chamber. I came into this world pure and unblemished. I wished to depart in the same manner, on such a joyous day. Why weeps Miss Wen here? A familiar voice suddenly rang out. Only then did I realize tears had unconsciously fallen as I recalled my past life. Wiping them away, I turned to find Pei Chuan standing behind me. General Pei. I bowed respectfully. Before I could say more, footsteps approached nearby. Hide quickly. I thought instinctively of my past life's encounter with him. Still trembling with fear, Pei Chuan looked puzzled. The approaching figure was Wei Lin. Yen'er. You really are here. Seeing me, he seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, hastening toward me and stopping before me. Your Highness. I took a few silent steps back. Why did you have Lord Wen propose annulling the engagement to the Marquis's household? A hint of displeasure flashed across his face. Yes, a few days ago. I explained the situation to father, hoping he would intervene and annul the marriage to the Marquis of Ningyuan's household. Father agreed, but I hadn't anticipated he would act so swiftly. Your Highness, I replied, I believed you had heeded our earlier discussion, since you have already wed Yen'er. It is unthinkable for the Wen family to have two sisters serving one husband. This marriage must naturally be annulled. Wei Lin stepped forward urgently, seizing my hand. If you dislike her, I can easily send her to the country estate. I cut him off immediately. Your Highness, watch your words. If such words reached the wrong ears, I feared I might repeat past mistakes. Wei Lin seemed poised to speak further when a soft chuckle sounded behind us. I looked up to find Pei Chuan standing there, his arrival unnoticed. Your calculations are indeed clever, Crown Prince Wei, he remarked. But I wonder what might your concubine think upon hearing such plans. Pei Chuan finished speaking and glanced toward the distance. There stood a woman in pink robes, her swollen belly visible. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she stared at us with a face full of resentment. During Wen Xian's convalescence at the mansion, I had kept my distance from both her and my aunt. Even when they came to speak with me, I excused myself, claiming I was too busy preparing for the wedding. After all, she carried the air of the Marquis of Ningyuan. Should anything happen to her within the Wen residence, not only would the Wen family bear the blame, but I would be the first to face the consequences. Moreover, the words trap were written all over Wen Xian and her aunt's faces. If I ever intended to deal with them, this would not be the moment I would choose. Finally, the day of father's wedding arrived. Wei Lin had intended to take Wen Xian home after witnessing the ceremony today. Little did he expect that his heartfelt confession would be overheard by Wen Xian at this very moment. Pei Chuan gave me a knowing wink, and it dawned on me he must have orchestrated this. I cleared my throat awkwardly. Xianer has fully recovered now, since the ceremony has concluded. Your Highness, perhaps you should take her back to the Marquis's residence first. At these words, Wen Xian's hopeful gaze turned to Wei Lin. Her husband personally coming to fetch her held profound significance even after overhearing his earlier words. A simple gesture of commitment from him now could turn the tables in her favor. Yet Wei Lin merely shot Wen Xian a cold glance. A mere concubine. Is she truly worth my personal attention? Pei Chuan chuckled at this. The crown prince is so cold-hearted. No wonder Miss Wen insisted on breaking off the engagement. Wei Lin sneered. This crown prince is speaking with my fiancé, General Pei. As an outsider, aren't you meddling a bit too much? Outsider. Jiang Rua is my aunt, by family ties. I'm also Miss Wen's cousin. If we're talking about closeness, the crown prince is the real outsider here. Pei Chuan refused to be outdone. I stared at Pei Chuan in shock. Jiang Rua, did she actually have such a grown nephew? Noticing my expression, Pei Chuan scratched his nose, looking slightly uncomfortable. Sometimes I think being cousins would be quite nice. I wonder if my cousin has considered it. Pei Chuan, have you no idea what you're saying? On the other end, Wei Lin flew into a rage and swung a punch at Pei Chuan. Pei Chuan easily caught him, stepping in front of me to block his view. A virtuous lady is a gentleman's ideal match. The crown prince already has a lady by his side. Why must you obstruct another's marriage? Wei Lin sneered coldly. So what? Until that betrothal is dissolved, she remains the future princess consort of our Marquis's household. Pei Chuan retorted sarcastically. The crown prince also speaks of future, so none of this counts. Meanwhile, Wen Xian's face turned deathly pale, clutching her stomach, she slowly sank to the ground. Wei Lin stormed off in fury, even forgetting to take Wen Xian with him. Thus, on the wedding night, the concubine enters, dead her father outside the main courtyard, pleading for him to vindicate Wen Xian. Though Xianer is but a concubine, she remains a daughter of the Wen family. The heir's actions have deeply humiliated the Wen household. I implore you, father, to vindicate Xiener, her father, already heavy, intoxicated, saw the concubine's deliberate adornment. Years of companionship stirred his compassion, and he was about to speak. Just as I stepped forward, a spear shot out from the bridal chamber. Wen Qi, after a few cups of wine. You've lost your bearings again. Jiang Rua had already lifted her veil and stepped out into the courtyard. That's when I knew Auntie's carefully laid plans had come to nothing. What drove her to this side was partly Wen Xian, but equally, she simply hoped to sway father with their years of affection. If she could stir his OLD feelings, she might gain a foothold to rival Jiang Ri just as she had once countered mother. Yet years of pampered existence had transformed her from that patient little concubine of old. And Jiang Rua was no longer mother. When Xian offered herself to the master's bed, becoming a concubine in the Marquis's household was already a favor granted by the master's face. That you, a mere concubine, are so easily swayed is one thing. But now that I've entered this household, the Wen residents will not tolerate such behavior. There must be order, Jiang Rua declared with unwavering resolve. The concubine's hopeful gaze turned to her father. The cold wind had sobered him somewhat, and Jiang Rua's words held truth. With impatience, he dismissed the concubine. Recognize your place. Her face drained of color, and she collapsed to the floor. She knew her last bargaining chip was gone. I had a carriage prepared for Wen Xian. When I went to inform her, the concubine and Wen Xian were weeping together. Seeing me arrive, Wen Xian spat angrily. Wen Yan, have you come to mock me? A spectacle, I retorted. As the legitimate daughter of the Wen family, why would I stoop to mocking a mere concubine? It's simply inappropriate for my sister, a concubine of the Marquis's household, to linger so long in the Wen residence. After all, she belongs to the Marquis's estate. It would be best for her to return home soon. I curved my lips into a faint smile. Wen Xian trembled with rage, pointing her finger at me. I may be a concubine in the Marquis's household, but I am still a Wen family daughter. Why can't I stay here? Even a married daughter is barely considered a Wen family daughter. How much less so a mere concubine like you? The Wen family has already shown great kindness by sending a carriage to take you back. I stepped closer and whispered in her ear. What? You eagerly chose to be a concubine. Yet now you have the nerve to demand respect. When Xian sobbed her way into the carriage, my aunt intended to see her off, but was stopped by a maid sent by Jiang Rua. The maid handed her a copy of Admonitions to Women, ordering her to copy it several times. This enraged my aunt so much she tore the book to shreds, only to be grabbed by the hair and dragged away by Jiang Rua, watching her weep bitterly while copying the text. I couldn't help but smile. In my past life, under Wen Xian's pressure and my aunt's relentless nagging, she finally gained status through her child, relying on the baby in her womb. She turned the tables, and was elevated to primary wife by my father. The image of mother and daughter living happily together still vividly haunts me. Now, seeing them both weeping and wailing, looking so wronged, my heart felt utterly satisfied. But upon returning to my quarters, Wei Lin's demeanor from earlier hat day suddenly flashed through my mind, and my heart sank. I couldn't fathom why his temperament had shifted so drastically, or why he was so adamant about marrying me. In my previous life, he had scarcely even seen me. After much deliberation, I returned to my room and wrote a letter to my maternal grandmother. No matter what, this marriage must be called off. Little did I expect that this action would enrage Wei Lin. My maternal grandfather was a prince of a different surname, having fought alongside the founding emperor on horseback to establish the empire. Yet, as the saying goes, when the hare is dead, The hunting dog is cooked, though my maternal grandfather had amassed great military merits. After the founding emperor passed, both the previous emperor and the current sovereign harbored deep suspicion toward him. Thus, to protect his clan, my maternal grandfather laid down his arms and retired to his ancestral lands. Becoming an idle prince, he even deliberately chose a father of humble origin. As for my mother, unexpectedly, my mother later died of depression, while my father's official career flourished. After my maternal grandfather passed away, they severed all ties with the royal house. Only my maternal grandmother remained haunted by my mother's death and couldn't bear to abandon me. Thus, she arranged for a trusted imperial physician to examine me monthly, ensuring I suffered no injustice in the one household. Yet in my previous life, under my stepmother's meticulous upbringing, I developed a spoiled and willful temperamental trait that ultimately brought about my own downfall. Only after I sent word did my maternal grandmother swiftly take action, though my maternal grandfather remained detached from worldly affairs. He still possessed some connections. Within days, the Marquis's wife, unable to withstand the pressure, withdrew the betrothal notice. The one who delivered the notice was Wen Xian, as she handed me the invitation. Wen Xian's face twisted with venom. Wen Yan, if you don't want the position of crown prince's consort, why didn't you simply let me have it? What is honey to one is arsenic to another. You are not me. You cannot know my thoughts. Why do you always project your own desires onto me? Besides, what bond exists between us beyond that thin thread of blood? I took the invitation and turned to leave. Wen Yan, you'll regret this. Wen Xian shouted after me. I smiled faintly. Perhaps, as a concubine's daughter, Wen Xian had always aimed to marry into a prestigious family to elevate her status. Yet she failed to see that humble households have their own daily struggles, while noble families harbor their own loneliness and desolation. How many women spend their entire lives in the inner quarters, striving ceaselessly, placing their husbands above all else only to realize that the security gained through dependence on men is as fleeting as a mirage, hanging by a thread of his whim. Only self-respect is the foundation for a woman to stand firm. This was the bitter lesson I learned with my life in my previous existence. Yet, unexpectedly, news soon spread through the inner courtyard that Wen Xian had suffered a miscarriage. Upon receiving the news, I couldn't help but frown. Father and Jiang Rua were both on duty at the magistrates of Feist today. As the sole master of the household now, I naturally had to go and see for myself. Upon reaching my aunt's quarters, chaos reigned. Wen Xian lay on the bed, pale as gold paper, blood seeping steadily beneath her. A horrifying sight, though the physician arrived swiftly. The child within her could not be saved. They had no choice but to perform an abortion. Yet when the physician declared this miscarriage had damaged her womb, leaving her likely unable to conceive again, Wen Xian collapsed onto the bed in despair. Admittedly, seeing Wen Xian reduced to this state brought me a certain satisfaction, but the moment I saw her flat belly, I remembered my parents' adage. Misfortune does not extend to one's children. A pang of unease stirred within me. There was little left for Wen Xian and me to say, and soon an eerie silence settled over the room. I rose to take my leave, but Wen Xian suddenly spoke in a hoarse voice. Wen Yan, do you know? If not for you, I would not have lost my child. Immediately after, I was struck with a blunt object. Darkness engulfed my vision, and I collapsed. When I awoke, I found myself in a dark chamber. Wei Lin stood before me, his presence stark and unmistakable. It dawned on me then Wei Lin had sacrificed his own child to abduct me. Why did he treat me this way in this lifetime? I huddled in the corner, only to have Wei Lin's next words confirm my suspicions. He smiled at me. Yenner. Since you've scorned the position of Marquise heiress in both lifetimes, then remain my unwed mistress, a secret mistress no one must see. My fists clenched. So, Wei Lin had reincarnated too, but I would never let him have his way. Ever since Wei Lin inexplicably confessed his feelin' GS to me, even refusing to withdraw the betrothal notice no matter what, I grew suspicious. So I asked Jiang Rua to investigate Wei Lin for me. Little did I know, Jiang Rua was too busy dealing with her father and promptly handed the task to Pei Chuan. She even winked at me, clearly hinting at matchmaking. Pei Chuan's intense gaze made me distinctly uncomfortable, but my attention was quickly drawn to his next words. He said that after returning from that spring banquet, Wei Lin had fallen into a high fever that lasted 3 full days and nights. After the fever broke, his personality changed drastically. It was from that moment onward that his attitude toward me shifted, and he became determined to marry me. I couldn't help but recall the stark contrast between the 2 times I'd met Wei Lin. Back then, I'd already suspected Wei Lin me. GHT have been reborn too, but since I'd barely seen him in my previous life until my death, I couldn't be certain. Just as I was lost in thought, Pei Chuan suddenly asked me, actually, Yenner, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. Have you also been reborn too? I stared at Pei Chuan in disbelief. Good heavens, Wei Lin remains uncertain. Yet I've unwittingly exposed Pei Chuan. Seeing my expression, the usually composed Pei Chuan scratched his head awkwardly. You look so different now compared to your past life. I hurled a teacup directly at him. Pei Chuan didn't dodge, merely grinning foolishly. With an ally gained, I had more room to maneuver. Wei Lin had grown paranoid lately. I didn't know when he'd strike. So breaking off the engagement as my way of provoking him, I dared not let my guard down. But since I couldn't predict Wei Lin's tactics, Pei Chuan gave me a special incense after learning of my situation. He discovered this incense during his military service in a foreign land. Applied to the skin, it was colorless and odorless, detectable only by specially trained bees. I concealed the scent within my jade bracelet. The moment I awoke to find myself abducted by Wei Lin, I activated the mechanism in the bracelet, releasing its fragrance. This bracelet had been specially commissioned for this purpose. Hairpins and earrings can be removed. Garments can be changed, but this jade bracelet is nearly impossible to take off without Wei Lin's awareness. He would never casually dispose of this bracelet. Pei Chuan knew about our rebirths. The moment he discovered my disappearance, he would begin searching for me. He even offered to give me the family heirloom gemstone he always wore around his neck, saying it was a life-protecting artifact passed down by his ancestors. I dared not accept such a precious item. As a military commander, Pei Chuan needed something to protect his life far more than I did. Seeing my firm refusal, Pei Chuan sighed helplessly and took it back. I surveyed my surroundings. Wei Lin had confined me in a dark chamber, one that had clearly been meticulously decorated to resemble a bridal chamber. Just as he raised the ceremonial wine cup to force me to drink, the chamber door was slashed open by a sword. Immediately afterward, a spear pinned his clothes to the floor. Caught off guard, Wei Lin allowed Pei Chuan and Jiang Rua to enter. Prince Wei, to kidnap the daughter of the Wen household in broad daylight, you truly have no regard for the law. Wei Lin and Jiang Rua quickly became entangled in a fight. Pei Chuan stepped forward, untied the ropes binding my wrists, and pulled me into his embrace, preparing to lead me out. Wei Lin, enraged, lunged forward only to be blocked by Jiang Rua's spear. A moment's distraction allowed Jiang Ru to press the spear across his neck. the tip aimed squarely at his throat, as Wei Lin struggled desperately. Pei Chuan, having secured my safety, joined the fray. Jiang Ruo muttered an annoyed meddler. The three of them fought their way out into the courtyard. I had been hiding behind a pillar. But when Xian appeared out of nowhere and shoved me toward Wei Lin, Jiang Ruo dodged to avoid me, only to be knocked to the ground by Wei Lin's palm strike. He then seized my throat and bellowed. Pei Chuan, if you still want her dead, stop this now. Pei Chuan feigned compliance but launched a covert attack. Wei Lin pushed me forward without hesitation to block the blade. Pei Chuan hastily withdrew his hand, but Wei Lin seized the opening, slashing his shoulder. Blood gushed forth. Yet he seemed oblivious to the pain, using his wounded arm as a shield to wrest me back from Wei Lin's grasp. Wei Lin naturally wouldn't let it go. He lunged his sword at me, wounded. Pei Chuan couldn't dodge in time and turned his back, taking Wei Lin's sword blow squarely. Jiang Ruo seized the moment to thrust his spear at Wei Lin. Wei Lin's sword was knocked from his hand, and Jiang Ruo subdued him. Soon, the men they brought bound Wei Lin and Wen Xian. Only then did I notice Wen Xian's clothes were in tatters, her entire being raving mad. She muttered one phrase over and over. Wen Yan, why didn't you just die? I looked at Jiang Ruo, but he was equally baffled. It was Wei Lin who solved the puzzle, gazing at Wen Xian with disgust. Just a madwoman. How dare she follow me here? Only then did I notice Wen Xian's erratic state alternating between lucidity and delirium. She clutched a rag doll, claiming it was her child, and alternately wept and laughed at me. Wen Yan, you killed my child. I will have my revenge. In just a few short days, Wen Xian had deteriorated to this state, but I had no time to dwell on this. The vast bloodstains on Pei Chuan's body were horrifying. Yet he held on until the men he'd arranged for arrived. Only then did he collapse into unconsciousness. Before losing consciousness, he clutched my hand. Yenner, don't worry. I told you I have a family heirloom that will protect me. I had Jiang Ruo take Pei Chuan to find a doctor while I stayed behind to clean up the mess. Jiang Ruo was initially uneasy. Yet she couldn't simply send Pei Chuan back like that. After repeatedly urging me to be careful, she finally left. Only after the people they brought reported that everything at the villa was under control did I allow them to take Wei Lin and Wen Xian away together. Imprisoning me alone was hardly enough to harm Wei Lin, but Pei Chuan had long been secretly gathering evidence of his crimes. Only then did I realize that Wei Lin had orchestrated my abduction by bandits in my previous life. He had planned to wipe out the entire bandit gang and emerge as the hero who rescued the damsel in distress. Unfortunately, Pei Chuan had unexpectedly appeared midway. Not only did he save me, but he also witnessed Wei Lin conversing with the bandit leader. That was why Wei Lin had been so determined to eliminate Pei Chuan in my past life. After my death in that past life, Pei Chuan was struck from behind by a blade wielded by Wei Lin's agent during a border skirmish. He fell from his horse, was captured by enemy forces, executed, and hung on the city walls. This caused the army's morale to collapse, leading to defeat and retreat. But none of this had happened yet in this life, so it naturally didn't count. Thus, Pei Chuan could only present evidence of Wei Lin's collusion with bandits. The emperor flew into a rage, sentencing all male members of the Wei family to exile and the women to the Imperial Music Bureau. Upon hearing the news, my aunt wailed and begged my father to spare Wen Xian, reasoning that she was, after all, blood of the Wen family. Her father, easily swayed, was about to intervene when Jiang Ruo's sharp words snapped him back to reality. Wei Lin's collusion with bandits outside the capital was a grave offense against the emperor. If her father wished to risk his life, He could go ahead. After pondering, he decided a guy. NST it. With no other recourse. The stepmother threatened to take her own life. But father's ears were soft for anyone. These days, he and Jiang Ruo were in perfect harmony. His heart already leaning toward Jiang Ruo. He didn't step in to stop the concubine as he once would have. The concubine threw herself against the wall. Her suicide attempt failed, leaving her instead with hemiplegia. Unable to move. Incapable of caring for herself. She would henceforth live at the mercy of others. It was truly pitiful. I thought everything had settled. Yet on the day of his exile, Wei Lin sent word through an intermediary, expressing a wish to see me before his departure. I had no intent of going. But his message contained one line. Zhuangzhou's dream. Like a life-to-mito, you truly wish to remain unenlightened. I was curious to see what Wei Lin might say. I asked Pei Chuan to accompany me. When Wei Lin saw us arrive, he gave a bitter smile. You truly trust him, Yan. Why have you never once looked at me? Neither in our past life nor this one. It was our betrothal that was arranged first. If that's all you wish to discuss, I'm afraid I cannot stay. With that, I gave Pei Chuan a discreet signal and made to leave. Only then did Wei Lin reveal the truth. I hadn't truly died back then. Clinging to a thread of life, he had scoured the land seeking renowned sages and mystics. Desperate to save me, eventually, he learned of a miraculous stone in this world with the power to resurrect the dead. But this stone was held by a small Tribia tribe long destroyed by war. He combed through every record and interviewed countless veterans of that era before discovering the truth. That small tribe had been annihilated by the hands of the Pei family's ancestor. The ancestor, being kind-hearted and knowing the tribe was inherently peaceful, having only joined the war out of necessity, had allowed the tribe's surviving members to retreat deep into the mountains, never to reappear in the world. The miraculous stone was a gift presented to the Pei family's ancestor by the tribe's chieftain at that time. The Pei family patriarch passed it down as a family heirloom. When Pei Chuan's body was brought back, the Pei family brought out this treasure, hoping it could save Pei Si Huan's life. Wei Lin infiltrated the Pei residence and stole it. Little did anyone know that the moment the stone was taken out, it turned to powder and entered my body. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn. I frowned, glancing at Pei Chuan and then at the thin cord around his neck. Presumably, the stone Wei Lin mentioned hung from that cord. Pei Chuan was watching me too, clearly having the same thought. So this was why all three of us had been reborn. All worldly phenomena are like dreams, illusions, and bubbles. Though bizarre, since we'd all been reborn. Such rangeness seemed plausible, yet I never imagined that rebirth would mean sewing another's wedding gown. In the past life, you didn't love me. In this life, you still didn't choose me. Wei Lin sighed. Yan. Sometimes I truly wonder if only I had been reborn sooner. Might this life have unfolded differently? It wouldn't have. I shook my head at Wei Lin. You had countless chances to change things. Yet you always believed everything was under your control. You despised the arranged marriage your family set up. Even without the spring banquet incident, you possessed 1,010,000 ways to refuse it. Yet you never imagined that an ordinary girl like me would willingly cede the hard-won marriage to the Marquis' household to my younger half-sister. That piqued your curiosity. So you married Wen Xian on a whim. Then let her bully and humiliate me. When you learned of my engagement to the scholar, you even fanned the flames, spreading those baseless rumors about me and Pei Chuan. If this is the so-called love spoken of by the crown prince, it is truly revolting. After my death, I finally found release. Yet you disregarded it all, driven by your own sordid desires. Yo. You forcibly kept me in this world. Feigning deep affection. Wei Lin. You claim you endured hardships in a past life to save me. But have you ever considered that my death in that life was actually your doing? And did I ever choose to awaken to accept your so-called love? Oh. And Pei Chuan, you not only caused his death but also robbed the Pei family of their hope. Wei Lin. Your so-called love is something Wen Yan truly cannot bear. Wei Lin's face paled inch by inch. Wen Yan. Believe it or not. The moment I caught sight of you at the spring banquet, I knew you were the woman I would marry, but I refused to let my family have their way so easily, so I tacitly allowed Wen Xian to enter my chambers. I never imagined that one misstep would lead you to demand the annulment so decisively. In this new life, I intended to reject Wen Xian. Yet your schemes led me down the same path as before. I believed that with everything restarted, everything would be different. I never knew that you too. I turned back, smiling at Wei Lin's pleading gaze. Your love, Prince, is nothing but for this shell of mine. As you said, whether in the past life or this one, you had countless chances to save us both. Yet you never made a choice, because you were weighing your options. Your Highness, what you feel for Wen Yan isn't love. Your so-called love is merely your possessive nature running wild. From start to finish, the only one you've ever loved is yourself. Your Highness, the road ahead is long, the mountains high and rivers deep. We shall never meet again. I took my leave and departed with grace, while Pei Chuan followed closely behind, with the stepmother no longer standing in the way. Jiang Ruo, being a straightforward and generous soul, wholeheartedly supported my efforts to reconnect with my maternal grandmother. Once the dust had settled, I sent a letter to my maternal grandmother. In the letter, I concealed the fact that I had lived another life, telling only that father and Jiang Ruo treated me like their own daughter. So she old rest assured, though I wished to mend the relationship between the Wen family and my maternal family, I would not force it. Mother's passing was a thorn lodged in my grandmother's heart. That she was willing to support me because of the blood of my mother flowing through my veins was the greatest concession she could make. Jiang Ruo asked me about my future plans. I told her I wished to traverse the mountains and rivers of Great Xia, to see the world beyond the confines of a maiden's chamber. But being a woman, I knew I must make thorough preparations before setting out. Jiang Ruo merely smiled at me. I always knew you were a woman with a mind of your own. Within days, several martial maids arrived at my courtyard, all skilled fighters Jiang Ruo had personally selected for me. Go if you wish. Her 4 bold, carefree characters were scrawled on a note delivered by one of the maids. Jiang Ruo had made thorough preparations, even having the maids inform me she'd already spoken to my father. I had no idea how she'd persuaded my father. But when he and Jiang Ru came out to see me off, I nearly laughed out loud at the obvious bruises under his eyes, clearly the work of someone's violent And just before I left, Jiang Ru pulled me aside. Go see this beautiful land for me too. I smiled in agreement. But when I looked up again, I saw that though she was smiling, her expression was tinged with melancholy. Once a woman marries, she becomes bound. Just like Jiang Rithoff, she possessed a mind as deep as valleys. She too could not break free from the shackles of this world. That was why she supported me, understood me. I squeezed her hand, gave her a smile, and then stepped into the carriage, pulling back the curtain. I gazed upon the bustling sights of the capital city. My heart grew faint. This journey meant I might not return for who knows how long. Fearful that even old friends might not recognize me upon meeting again. Yet I never imagined that the moment I reached the dock, a dashing young man would stand before me. Pei Chuan winked at me. I happen to have business along the same route as Miss Wen. Might I join you for a stretch? I shook my head. Peichuan froze. Miss Wen. Through 2 lifetimes of storms, I've been fortunate to have your secret protection. Wen Yan is profoundly grateful. Yet a woman's gratitude need not be expressed only through the cliched tropes of romance novels like pledging her body. I bowed to Peichuan. The path ahead. Wen Yan wishes tea. Oh, forge alone. Should you ever require my aid? Though my strength is meager, I shall brave fire and water without hesitation. Peichuan smiled with understanding. Offering no further entreaties, I turned and boarded the boat. His gaze burning hot behind me, I knew Peichuan cherished me deep. In this life, I was consumed by vengeance. Unaware why I had been reborn, my sole purpose was to seek justice for myself. Exhausting every ounce of my being, I had believed that even if I avenged my greatest wrongs, it would leave us both broken. Yet someone treasured me like a precious jewel, shielding me from harm, even willing to sacrifice 2 lifetimes to pull me from this mire. I ought to be grateful, but in this life, I refuse to be a woman confined to the inner quarters, dependent on a man. Even Jiang Ruo, as free-spirited as she was, willingly gave up her sword after marrying my father, content to cook and clean, never to take up arms again. Even my mother, with her noble status, was trapped by love and ultimately died in sorrow. How could a woman as ordinary as I escape such a fate? Miss Wen, take care. Peichuan stood on the pier, waving to me. Take care. I turned to gaze into the distance, where sky and water merged into Oni world apart. Story epilogue. One day, while traveling, I stumbled upon a hidden paradise, hidden amidst mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas. This secluded realm operated under distinct laws. Men and women stood equal. They worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. Marriage was freely chosen, and all lived without want. They came together when hearts aligned and parted when they did not. On major tribal matters, every member held a vote, with the minority yielding to the majority. Clothed in simple garments, they welcomed me warmly upon my arrival. They served me various mountain delicacies, explaining that no outsider had set foot here for a century. By day, they guided me through the utopia's landscapes. By night, they built massive pyres for bonfire gatherings. They taught me their unique dances, shared their special milk wine, and even a handsome young man boldly confessed his affection. I was overwhelmed, drinking heavily. As I began to feel tipsy, someone led me to meet the clan chief. We walked a long way before reaching a spot between sheer cliffs. The chief had a kind, benevolent face and smiled warmly at me. What do you think of this place? Guest. My face flushed, and I stammered. It's wonderful, truly a paradise beyond the world. The chief nodded. Indeed. This place is called Peach Blossom Spring, but you are no stranger here. A mountain breeze blew, clearing my head slightly. Our clan once bestowed a sacred stone to repay a great debt to a general. The lingering spiritual energy of that stone remains within you. That is how you broke through the barrier and found our clan. I couldn't help but recall the strange stone Wei Lin had mentioned. It was that stone that granted us 3 a second life. I looked up at the clan chief, who nodded in affirmation. At the time, the general misunderstood. The sacred stone's power isn't resurrection, but the manipulation of time and space. Those connected to the stone are returned to a fixed point in time. However, it can only be used once every 100 years. After its use, our clan must tend to it day and night, waiting a full century before it can be activated again. The clan chief explained slowly. I see. It all made sense now. And my drunkenness vanished completely. I bowed respectfully to the clan chieftain. Thank you for your enlightenment. Chieftain. No need for formalities. The sacred stone possesses a spirit and does not aid others lightly. You are a woman of great wisdom. Now that the sacred stone has returned to our clan, I wish you all your heart's desires may come true in the days to come. The chieftain's figure Adieu ally faded away. Then, darkness enveloped my vision. When I awoke, I found myself inside a tent in the forest, surrounded by lush greenery. Suddenly, the deeds of the Pei family's ancestors came to mind. It seemed that everything was guided by a higher purpose. The end.